My mom pointed at me during Easter lunch and said, "You're the reason this." I am Allison, 27 years old. Easter lunch with my family turned into a nightmare when my mom suddenly pointed at me and declared I was the reason our family was always falling apart. She told me to leave if I couldn't handle the truth, so I did quietly without a word. 2 weeks later, she called, screaming, "Why is the Wi-Fi, water, and power all shut off?" I simply replied, "Guess the family disgrace took the utilities with them." If you are watching this, let me know where you are viewing from and hit that like and subscribe button to follow my journey of standing up for myself. Family gatherings were always tense affairs in our household, but I still held on to hope every time. The tension between my mother Janet and me had been building for years, a cold war of disapproval and desperate attempts to please that never seemed to end. My father Robert was the eternal peacekeeper, who never actually kept peace, just avoided conflict by staying silent when Mom unleashed her criticisms on me. My sister Stephanie was the golden child, the one who could do no wrong in my mother's eyes, while I somehow became the designated family failure before I even had a chance to succeed. "Allison, why can't you be more like your sister?" was practically the soundtrack of my childhood. Stephanie was 3 years older, always perfectly put together with straight A's and the right friends. She embraced the role of Mom's ally, often joining in when criticism came my way. The only true ally I had in my family was my younger brother Daniel, 5 years my junior, who somehow escaped the harsh judgment that followed me everywhere. "Your problem is you're too sensitive," Mom would say whenever I tried to express how her words hurt me. "The real world doesn't care about your feelings." This was usually followed by a long list of ways I had disappointed her that week. My father would stare at his plate, or suddenly become very interested in whatever game was on TV. Not once did he stand up for me. Growing up, Mom had impossibly high standards. If I brought home a 98% on a test, the conversation would focus on the 2% I missed. If I won second place in an art competition, she would point out the person who beat me. Nothing was ever good enough. I eventually stopped sharing my achievements altogether, which only gave her more ammunition. "See, you never tell us anything," she would complain to relatives, casting herself as the victim of my withdrawal. The one person who saw me for who I truly was had been my grandmother, my mom's mother, ironically enough. Grandma Lucy had lived with us for 3 years before she passed when I was 16. She would quietly encourage me when Mom wasn't around, slipping me notes with messages like, "Your art is beautiful," or "I'm proud of you just as you are." When she died, she left me a small inheritance of $25,000 with instructions that I should use it to build a life that brings you joy. Mom was furious, insisting that money should have been split equally among all the grandchildren. I kept that money secret for years, slowly putting myself through art school with it, supplementing with part-time jobs. I eventually built a modest career as a freelance graphic designer. The freedom of working for myself meant everything to me, even if the income wasn't always stable. What my family didn't know, what I never told them, was that for the past 5 years, I had been quietly paying their utility bills. It started when I overheard my parents arguing about money during a rare visit home. Dad had lost his job and they were 3 months behind on utilities. Without telling them, I set up automatic payments from my account. I told myself it was temporary, just until they got back on their feet, but somehow it became permanent. Every month, around $400 disappeared from my account to keep their lights on, their water running, and their internet connected. It was my way of trying to help without enduring the criticism that would surely come with their knowledge of my assistance. My friend Jessica was the only person who knew about this arrangement. "They're taking advantage of you," she would say during our coffee dates. "They don't even know what you're doing for them, and they still treat you like crap." "They're still my family," I would reply, though the justification sounded weaker each time. Deep down, I kept hoping things would change. That maybe if I was kind enough, helpful enough, successful enough, Mom would finally see me. Really see me. That Dad would finally find his voice and stand up for me. That Stephanie would remember we used to be friends before Mom pitted us against each other. That hope led me to say yes when Mom called about Easter lunch this year. "The whole family will be there," she said, her voice carrying that familiar tone of obligation rather than invitation. "Daniel is asking about you." She knew exactly what strings to pull. "I'll be there," I promised, ignoring Jessica's concerned look across the table. "I'm bringing dessert." "Just don't make that chocolate thing again. Your father's watching his sugar," Mom replied, before hanging up. I spent the night before Easter baking a sugar-free apple pie, carefully following a recipe I found online. I wrapped small gifts for everyone's simple but thoughtful items I hoped they would appreciate. I even bought a new dress, a soft blue one, that brought out my eyes, and spent extra time on my hair and makeup. I wanted to look put together, confident, successful. The kind of daughter they could be proud of. "This time will be different," I told myself as I drove to their house that Sunday morning, the pie carefully balanced on the passenger seat beside me. "We're all adults now. We can start fresh." If only I had known what was waiting for me at that Easter table. If only I had known that sometimes hope is just another word for setting yourself up to be hurt again. The spring sun shone brilliantly as I pulled into my parents' driveway that Easter Sunday, casting a warm glow that felt at odds with the knot forming in my stomach. The house looked the same as always, a well-maintained two-story suburban home with carefully tended flower beds that Mom fussed over endlessly. The pristine exterior never quite matched the emotional messiness that dwelled inside. I checked my reflection one last time in the rearview mirror, straightened my necklace, and gathered the pie and gifts. Taking a deep breath, I walked to the door with a smile plastered on my face, the one I had perfected over years of family gatherings. Mom opened the door before I could knock. "You're late," she said by way of greeting, though I was actually 5 minutes early according to the time we had agreed upon. "Happy Easter, Mom," I replied, leaning in to kiss her cheek. She accepted it stiffly, her body rigid. "Everyone's already here," she said, turning to lead me inside. I followed her through the familiar hallway lined with family photos, noticing as always that the ones featuring me were minimal and usually group shots where I was partially obscured by someone else. The dining room was already buzzing with conversation. Dad sat at the head of the table looking uncomfortable in a button-down shirt that seemed slightly too tight at the collar. Stephanie was there with her husband Brad, both in color-coordinated outfits that screamed perfect couple. My brother Daniel spotted me first, his face breaking into a genuine smile as he jumped up to hug me. "Allie, finally someone normal to talk to," he whispered in my ear as he embraced me. At 22, Daniel was finishing college and still had the enthusiasm of someone who believed he could escape our family dynamics unscathed. "I brought pie," I announced to the table, setting it on the sideboard among the other dishes. "Sugar-free apple." "Sugar-free usually means taste-free," Stephanie commented with a little laugh. "But I'm sure you tried your best." "Allison, you can put the gifts over there," Mom directed, pointing to a small table in the corner. "We'll open them after we eat." I complied, feeling like a child again under her watchful eye. As I took my seat between Daniel and Dad, I noticed the table was beautifully set with Mom's best china and fresh flowers. She always went all out for holidays, caring deeply about appearances. The meal began pleasantly enough with Dad saying grace followed by the passing of dishes. I complimented Mom on the ham, which was perfectly cooked, and she acknowledged it with a curt nod. The conversation flowed around me, mostly Stephanie talking about her job as a pharmaceutical sales rep and her upcoming vacation to Hawaii. "So Allison's still doing that computer drawing thing?" Brad asked during a lull, clearly trying to include me. "Graphic design," I corrected gently. "And yes, business is actually going really well. I just landed a contract with a startup that could turn into something long-term." "That's great," Dad said, the first words he'd spoken directly to me since I arrived. "Startups are so unstable, though," Mom interjected. "Stephanie's company has been around for 50 years. That's security." I took a sip of water, choosing not to respond. Daniel caught my eye and gave a subtle eye roll of solidarity. Speaking of stability, Mom continued, when are you going to settle down, Allison? Stephanie was already married at your age. I'm focusing on my career right now. I replied evenly, the same answer I gave every time she brought this up. Your career, she repeated, making air quotes around the word. Drawing pictures on a computer isn't exactly a career path with a retirement plan. Mom, Daniel warned, but she waved him off. I'm just saying what everyone thinks. You're nearly 30 living alone in that apartment, no partner, no children, no real job. What's your plan? I felt my cheeks burning but kept my voice steady. My plan is to build my business and continue doing work that I find fulfilling. Fulfilling doesn't pay the bills, she scoffed. Actually, it does. I said, a hint of pride creeping into my voice. I'm doing very well financially. It wasn't entirely true, especially with the drain of paying their utilities, but they didn't need to know that. Well enough to visit your family more than twice a year? Mom asked, her voice sharp. Daniel manages to come home every few weeks, and he's got a full course load. Daniel lives 20 minutes away at State, I pointed out. I'm 3 hours from here. A distance you chose, she fired back. The tension in the room was palpable now. Brad became very interested in his mashed potatoes, while Stephanie watched with a small, satisfied smile. She always enjoyed when Mom's criticism was directed at me instead of her. I didn't move away to avoid you, Mom, I said, though we both knew that wasn't entirely true. I moved for job opportunities. Is that why you never call? Why you forgot Dad's birthday last month? I hadn't forgotten. I'd sent a card and called, but Dad hadn't answered. I'd left a voicemail that he apparently never mentioned to her. I sent a card, I said, looking at Dad. And I called. Dad looked uncomfortable. I think I got a card. Wasn't sure if it was for Easter or birthday, though. Mom seized on this. See, you can't even bother to make it clear what you're sending cards for. You've always been so thoughtless, Allison. Something inside me shifted. All the years of accepting these jabs, of making excuses, of trying to keep the peace suddenly felt too heavy to bear. I am not thoughtless, I said quietly but firmly. I remember every birthday, every anniversary. I call, I send gifts, I show up for holidays, even when I know I'll spend the entire time being criticized. Mom's eyes widened in outrage. Criticized? I'm trying to help you. Someone needs to point out where you're going wrong in life before it's too late. Going wrong according to who? I have a career I love, friends who care about me, a life that makes me happy. The only time I feel like a failure is when I'm sitting at this table. The room went deadly silent. Dad stared at his plate. Stephanie's smile had vanished. Daniel looked torn between pride and terror at my outburst. Mom stood slowly, her napkin falling to the floor as she pointed a finger directly at me. Her face had turned an alarming shade of red and her voice shook with rage. You, she said, her finger still aimed at me like a weapon. You are the reason this family is always falling apart. Your sensitivity, your dramatics, your constant need to be different. If you can't handle hearing the truth about yourself, then maybe you should leave. The words hit me like physical blows. I looked around the table hoping anyone would defend me. Dad studied his hands. Stephanie gave a small nod of agreement with Mom. Only Daniel looked horrified, his eyes pleading with me not to believe her words. In that moment, something broke inside me, but something else hardened. Without a word, I placed my napkin beside my half-eaten meal, stood up, and walked out of the dining room. Where do you think you're going? Mom called after me. I didn't answer. I collected my purse from the hallway table, walked out the front door, and closed it quietly behind me. No drama, no slamming, just a gentle click that somehow felt more final than any bang could have. As I drove away, I caught a glimpse of Daniel watching from the window, his hand raised in a small wave. I waved back, tears beginning to blur my vision as I turned the corner and left behind the house that had never truly felt like home. The drive back to my apartment passed in a blur of tears and autopilot navigation. My hands gripped the steering wheel so tightly, my knuckles turned white, and my mind replayed Mom's words on an excruciating loop. You are the reason this family is always falling apart. When I finally reached my apartment building, I sat in the parking lot for a long while, unable to summon the energy to move. The beautiful spring day continued around me, oblivious to my pain birds singing and flowers blooming as if everything was right with the world. Eventually, I made my way upstairs to my apartment, a small but bright one-bedroom that I had lovingly decorated with my own artwork and secondhand furniture. Usually this space felt like a sanctuary. Today it felt like a hiding place. I kicked off my shoes, still in my Easter dress, and collapsed onto my couch. The tears came again, hot and unstoppable. All the effort I had put into looking nice, baking the perfect pie, buying thoughtful gifts, all for what? To be told I was the reason my family was broken. My phone buzzed with a text from Daniel. Are you okay? That was brutal. Mom's still ranting. I couldn't bring myself to reply just yet. Instead, I changed into comfortable clothes, made a cup of tea, and sat by my window watching the world go by as my mind wandered through a painful archive of memories. I remembered being 6 years old, proudly showing Mom a drawing I had made of our family. Why did you make my hair gray? She had demanded. I don't have gray hair. I had tried to explain it was just the crayon I chose, but she had already walked away, leaving the drawing crumpled on the counter. I remembered being 12, winning a school writing contest, and Mom asking, couldn't you have written about something less depressing, when the theme had been overcoming challenges? I remembered being 16 when Grandma Lucy died and finding solace in painting. Mom had found me in my room surrounded by canvases and scoffed, this isn't going to bring her back, you know, and it's certainly not going to get you into college. Every memory carried the same message. You're not enough. You're doing it wrong. You're the problem. My phone rang, startling me from my thoughts. It was Daniel. Hey, I answered, my voice hoarse from crying. Allie, I'm so sorry, he said immediately. What Mom said was horrible and completely untrue. Is it though? I asked, the doubt that had been planted so long ago sprouting again. Maybe I am too sensitive. Maybe I do cause problems. Stop that, Daniel said firmly. You know that's not true. Mom has always been like this long before you supposedly became the family problem. Remember how she used to treat Dad's parents? How she fought with her sisters? She's always needed someone to blame. What happened after I left? I asked, not sure I wanted to know. Daniel sighed. More of the same. She kept going on about how disrespectful you were, how you've always thought you were too good for the family. Dad just sat there. Stephanie backed Mom up, of course. I tried to defend you, but you know how that goes. I'm sorry you had to deal with that. Don't apologize. I'm proud of you for walking out. I wish I had the courage to do that sometimes. We talked a while longer, Daniel reassuring me that I wasn't crazy or wrong, that Mom's behavior was the problem, not my reaction to it. After we hung up, I felt marginally better, but the ache remained. I spent the next few days in a fog, going through the motions of my work, but unable to focus properly. Jessica came over with ice cream and listened as I recounted the Easter disaster. You know what the worst part is, I told her. After all these years, I still hoped it would be different. I still wanted her approval. That's because you're a good person with a big heart, Jessica replied. But maybe it's time to accept that she's incapable of giving you what you need. On the 4th day after Easter, I was organizing some files when I came across a folder labeled Family Expenses. Inside were copies of all the utility bills I had been paying for my parents for the past 5 years. Water, electricity, internet, all automatically deducted from my account each month. I stared at the papers, a strange feeling washing over me. For 5 years, I had been silently supporting my family financially, and not once had they acknowledged it. Not once had they even noticed. They had no idea that the failure daughter, the one who didn't have a real job, had been keeping their lights on and their water running. In that moment, I made a decision that wasn't about revenge, but about self-respect. I called each utility company and explained that I would no longer be responsible for the accounts at my parents' address. Some required documentation that I provided proving the bills had been in my name, or linked to my bank account. Within a few hours, the automatic payments were canceled. Next, I called my bank and set up a new savings account, naming it Future Fund. I scheduled an automatic transfer for the same amount I had been sending to my parents' utilities each month. This money would now go toward building my own life, instead of subsidizing people who couldn't even treat me with basic respect. That evening, I found myself searching online for resources about toxic family dynamics. I discovered a support group that met weekly at a community center not far from my apartment. The description read, "For adults dealing with difficult family relationships and establishing healthy boundaries." The next day, I attended my first meeting. Sitting in a circle with strangers who somehow understood exactly what I was going through was both terrifying and liberating. A woman named Margaret shared a story about her emotionally abusive father that could have been about my mother. A man named Carlos talked about cutting contact with his parents and the guilt he still felt 2 years later. When it was my turn, I spoke hesitantly at first, then with growing confidence as I saw nods of recognition around the circle. These people got it. They didn't think I was overreacting or too sensitive. They had lived it too. "The hardest part," I said, "is that I still love them. I still want them to love me back in a way that doesn't hurt." The group facilitator, a kind-eyed therapist named Dr. Harper, nodded. "That's the tragedy of these relationships. The love doesn't go away just because it's painful. But you can learn to love yourself enough to set boundaries that protect you." I left that meeting with a list of book recommendations, the phone number of a therapist who specialized in family trauma, and a tiny spark of something that felt like hope. Not the desperate hope of winning my mother's approval, but a new kind of hope, one built on the possibility of healing regardless of whether my family ever changed. 2 weeks passed in a blur of therapy appointments, support group meetings, and long talks with Jessica and Daniel. I began to sleep better, to find joy in my work again, to feel stronger in my conviction that I deserved better treatment than I had received on Easter. Then my phone rang with my parents' home number. 2 weeks after I walked out of Easter lunch, my phone lit up with my parents' number. I stared at it, heart racing, unsure whether to answer. On the fourth ring, I took a deep breath and swiped to accept the call. "Hello." "Allison, it's Daniel." His voice sounded strained, almost amused, but with an undercurrent of stress. "Hey, what's up?" "Everything okay?" "Well, that depends on your definition of okay," he said with a nervous laugh. "There's been an interesting development here. All the utilities got shut off yesterday. No warning, just suddenly no internet, no water, no electricity." I gripped the phone tighter. All of them at once. Yeah, it was quite the scene. Mom was in the middle of her favorite TV show when everything went dark. Dad was in the shower and got stuck with shampoo in his hair. I was trying to submit a paper online for class. "That sounds chaotic," I said carefully. "Total chaos," Daniel confirmed. "Dad called the utility companies this morning from his cell phone. Apparently none of the bills have been paid for the last 2 months. I swallowed hard. "That's strange." "Super strange," Daniel agreed, his tone indicating he suspected more. "Especially since Mom swears she pays them all automatically. But here's the really weird part, Allie. When Dad talked to the electric company, they said the account had been in your name. For years." There was a pause as he waited for me to respond. I closed my eyes, picturing the folder of bills in my desk drawer. "It wasn't just the electricity, was it?" Daniel asked softly when I didn't speak. "No," I admitted. "Water, internet, too. I've been paying them since Dad lost his job at Mercer 5 years ago. I overheard them fighting about bills during Thanksgiving that year, so I just took care of it." Daniel let out a low whistle. "All this time and you never said anything." What was I supposed to say? "Hey, by the way, I'm paying your bills because you can't manage your money." You know how Mom would have taken that. "As an insult and an attack, yeah," Daniel agreed. "Wow, Allie. That's thousands of dollars over the years." "About 24,000 actually," I said, having done the math recently. 400 a month for 5 years. "Jesus," Daniel breathed. Does anyone else know about this? Just Jessica. I paused. And now you. Mom and Dad don't know yet. Dad thinks there was some kind of clerical error. He's been on hold with customer service for hours. Daniel sounded both impressed and concerned. Allie, when they find out. I know, I said. Are you going to tell them or should I? I considered this. Part of me wanted to remain anonymous to let them figure it out on their own. But another part knew this conversation was inevitable. I'll handle it, I finally said. Good luck, Daniel replied. For what it's worth, I think you did something incredibly generous, and they don't deserve to make you feel bad about stopping. After hanging up with Daniel, I tried to prepare myself for the conversation I knew was coming. I wrote down talking points, practiced responses to the accusations I anticipated. I even called Dr. Harper for a quick pep talk about maintaining boundaries during difficult conversations. Less than an hour later, my phone rang again. Mom's name flashed on the screen. This time, I didn't hesitate. Hello, Mom. Allison. Her voice was ice-cold, controlled fury vibrating through the single word. Would you like to explain why all our utilities have been shut off? I canceled the automatic payments from my account, I said, keeping my voice steady. Your account? She asked, confusion momentarily replacing anger. What are you talking about? I've been paying your water, electricity, and internet bills for the past 5 years, Mom, since Dad lost his job at Mercer. There was a long silence then. That's ridiculous. We pay our own bills. No, you don't. Check with the utility companies if you don't believe me. The accounts are in my name or linked to my bank account. I set it up after Thanksgiving 5 years ago when I overheard you and Dad fighting about being behind on payments. Another silence, longer this time. I could almost hear her mind working, trying to process this information, trying to find a way to make it my fault. When she spoke again, her voice had risen several octaves. Why is the Wi-Fi, water, and power all shut off? She shouted, as if volume could erase the truth I had just shared. I took a deep breath, thinking of all the therapy sessions, all the support group meetings, all the painful memories, and I replied calmly, Guess the family disgrace took the utilities with them. The shocked silence that followed gave me a moment of vindication that I hadn't expected to feel so sweet. You did this on purpose, she finally said, her voice shaking. You waited until we would be humiliated, until it would cause maximum disruption. No, Mom. I simply stopped paying your bills. Bills you didn't even know I was paying because you never bothered to check where the money was coming from. I supported this family financially for 5 years without a word of thanks, all while being told I was the problem, the failure, the reason everything was falling apart. How dare you, she began. But I cut her off. I dare because I'm done being your scapegoat. I'm done being told I'm not enough when I've been silently holding things together. I'm done being the target of your anger when I've done nothing to deserve it. You ungrateful, she started again, but I interrupted once more. I need to go now, Mom. I have client work to finish. You should call the utility companies and set up accounts in your own name. Dad's credit score should be good enough now that he's been at the new job for a few years. We are not done discussing this, Allison. Actually, we are for today. Goodbye, Mom. I hung up my hands, shaking, but my mind surprisingly clear. For the first time in my life, I had stood up to my mother without backing down, without apologizing, without accepting blame that wasn't mine to carry. It felt terrifying. It felt right. My phone immediately began ringing again, Mom calling back. I silenced it and set it aside. Then I opened my laptop and immersed myself in a design project, channeling all my emotions into creating something beautiful from the chaos. Later that evening, I received a text from Daniel. Mom wants to have a family meeting this Saturday at Perkins. Neutral territory, she says. Are you coming? I stared at the message for a long time before replying, Yes, but this time I'm not backing down. The Perkins restaurant was busy that Saturday afternoon, filled with the chatter of families enjoying late lunches and early dinners. I had deliberately arrived 10 minutes late, partly to calm my nerves with a slow drive, and partly to ensure I wouldn't be the first one there awkwardly waiting for everyone else to arrive. I spotted my family immediately in a corner booth. Mom sat rigidly beside Dad, who looked uncomfortable in a button-down shirt that was different from the one he'd worn at Easter, but had the same too-tight collar. Stephanie sat across from them, checking her phone while Daniel had saved a space beside him for me. Taking a deep breath, I walked toward them, feeling strangely calm despite the storm I knew was brewing. I had spent the past few days preparing for this confrontation with my therapist's help role-playing potential scenarios and practicing responses that were firm but not hostile. "Hi," I said simply as I reached the table. Daniel stood to hug me. Dad gave an awkward nod. Stephanie glanced up from her phone with a look that suggested I was interrupting something important. Mom didn't acknowledge me at all. "Thanks for saving me a spot," I told Daniel as I slid into the booth beside him. "I ordered you a coffee," he said, pushing a mug toward me. "2 creams, no sugar, right?" The fact that my brother remembered how I took my coffee when my mother couldn't even bother to greet me spoke volumes. A waitress approached to take our orders, and we all went through the motions of choosing food, creating a brief respite from the tension. Once she left, silence fell over the table. "Well," Mom finally said, her voice clipped, "I suppose we should address the elephant in the room." I took a sip of coffee, waiting. "Allison has been paying our utility bills," she announced to the table as if it were breaking news. And then she suddenly stopped, causing everything to be shut off without warning. "That's not exactly how it happened," I said calmly. "No. You admit you canceled the payments knowing full well what would happen." "Yes, I canceled payments for bills that were never my responsibility in the first place. Bills I voluntarily paid for 5 years without anyone ever noticing or thanking me." Mom's face flushed. "We didn't know because you never told us. How were we supposed to thank you for something you kept secret?" "The same way you check any other financial matter in your life," I replied. "By looking at statements, by knowing where your money goes, by noticing that 3 major utilities weren't being deducted from your accounts for 5 years. Dad cleared his throat. "Allison has a point, Janet. We should have noticed." Mom shot him a glare so fierce he immediately backpedaled. "Though she should have told us, of course," he added quickly. "I brought proof," I said, reaching into my bag and pulling out a folder. Copies of all the bills' bank statements showing the payments from my account emails, confirming when I set up the automatic payments. I laid them on the table and pushed them toward my parents. Dad hesitantly picked up a few papers, studying them with a furrowed brow. "My God," he murmured as he flipped through 5 years of evidence. "All this time?" "Yes," I said simply. Stephanie leaned forward to look at the papers. "Why would you do this?" she asked, sounding genuinely confused. "Why pay their bills secretly?" "Because they needed help," I answered. Dad had lost his job. They were falling behind, and I wanted to help without making them feel like they had to be grateful to me. "So this was some kind of power play," Mom interjected. "A way to feel superior while pretending to be generous." I shook my head, refusing to be baited. "No, Mom. It was a daughter trying to help her parents without wounding their pride. It was love, pure and simple." "If it was love," she countered, "then why stop? Why pull the rug out from under us?" I looked her directly in the eyes. "Because love shouldn't be a one-way street. Because I realized I was enabling a dynamic where I give and give while receiving criticism and blame in return. Because after what happened at Easter, I decided it was time to put that money toward building my own life instead." Mom scoffed. "So it is about Easter. You're punishing us because I told you some hard truths you didn't want to hear." "No," I said firmly. "I'm establishing a boundary. I'm saying I won't financially support people who tell me I'm the reason their family is falling apart. I won't keep pouring resources into relationships where I'm made to feel worthless." The waitress returned with our food, creating another momentary pause in the conversation. No one touched their plates. $24,000, Dad said quietly, still looking at the papers. "That's how much you've paid over 5 years." Approximately, I confirmed. 400 a month, give or take, depending on usage. That's more than my first year's salary out of college, Daniel remarked, letting out a low whistle. It would have been a nice down payment on a house, I added, or a substantial emergency fund. Yet you chose to give it to us, Dad said, a note of wonder in his voice. Without telling us. Yes. Why? He asked, looking genuinely perplexed. Because despite everything, you're my family. And I thought, if I just kept trying, kept giving, kept showing up, eventually things would change. Eventually I'd be enough. Dad's face crumpled slightly at my words. For perhaps the first time, he seemed to truly see the pain that had been living in me for so long. This is ridiculous, Stephanie cut in. You're making Mom and Dad feel terrible over something they didn't even know about. If you wanted recognition for paying the bills, you should have said something. That's not what this is about, I replied. This isn't about recognition or gratitude. It's about being told I'm the problem in this family when I've actually been one of the supports holding it up. So now you want a medal for doing something nice, she shot back. No, Steph. I want to be treated with basic respect. I want to stop being the scapegoat for every family issue. I want Mom to stop pointing her finger at me and declaring me the cause of all her unhappiness. I have never, Mom began indignantly. You literally did exactly that at Easter, Daniel interrupted, surprising everyone at the table. You stood up, pointed at Allison, and said she was the reason our family is always falling apart. Those were your exact words. Mom's mouth opened and closed a few times, seemingly at a loss for how to deny something that had multiple witnesses. I was upset, she finally said. Allison was being disrespectful. By saying she feels like a failure when she sits at our table, Daniel pressed. By pointing out that she only gets criticized, never supported, that's disrespect. Stay out of this, Daniel, Mom warned. This is between Allison and me. No, it's not, he insisted. It affects all of us. The way you treat Allison, the way you've always made her the problem, it's toxic for everyone. I've watched it my whole life, and I'm sick of pretending it's okay. Stephanie looked uncomfortable for the first time. Daniel, this isn't the place. Then where is the place? He demanded. When have we ever discussed this as a family? When have we ever acknowledged that Mom picks a target and everyone else just accepts it to avoid being next? An uncomfortable silence fell over the table. Dad stared at his untouched food. Mom's face had turned an alarming shade of red. Stephanie looked like she wanted to be anywhere else. I didn't come here to attack anyone, I said softly, breaking the silence. I came to explain my decision and to set a boundary going forward. I will no longer be financially supporting the family. I will no longer accept being blamed for problems I didn't create, and I will no longer sit quietly when I'm mistreated. So what does that mean? Mom asked, her voice tight. You're cutting us off completely. No, I said. It means I'm changing the terms of our relationship. I'm still your daughter and I still love you all, but I won't participate in the old dynamics anymore. And if we don't agree to these new terms, she challenged, then I'll limit my contact to what I can handle emotionally. I'll see Daniel whenever we arrange it. I'll send cards for birthdays and holidays, but I won't put myself in situations where I know I'll be hurt. Dad finally spoke up, his voice uncharacteristically firm. I think Allison is being reasonable, Janet. We've always been harder on her than the other kids. Mom looked at him in shock, clearly not expecting him to take my side. Robert, she left us without electricity or water for 3 days. How is that reasonable? She stopped paying bills that were never her responsibility, he countered. Bills we should have been paying ourselves. Bills we didn't even notice weren't coming out of our account for 5 years. Mom turned to Stephanie, clearly expecting support, but my sister was staring at the table, unusually quiet. Stephanie, Mom prompted. My sister looked up, her expression conflicted. I don't know, Mom. I never realized. I knew you were harder on Allison, but I always thought it was because she needed more guidance or something. I never considered how it might feel from her perspective. This admission from my typically loyal to Mom's sister seemed to take the wind out of Mom's sails. She looked around the table, suddenly finding herself without allies. "So you're all taking her side?" she asked incredulously. "After everything I've done for this family." "It's not about sides, Mom," I said gently. "It's about acknowledging a harmful pattern and trying to change it, for everyone's sake." "I don't see what's harmful about wanting the best for my children," she replied defensively. "Criticism isn't the same as wanting the best for someone," I pointed out. "Constantly finding fault isn't the same as guidance." Mom fell silent. Her lips pressed into a thin line. I could see her struggling with these concepts, with the idea that her parenting approach might have caused damage rather than improvement. "I think," Dad said slowly, "that we all need to reflect on how we communicate with each other. Janet, maybe we could try that couples counseling Pastor Mike suggested last year." Mom looked like she wanted to refuse outright, but glancing around at the united front she was facing, she gave a curt nod instead. "Fine," she said tightly, "if everyone thinks I'm the problem." "No one said you're the problem, Mom," I replied, unable to miss the irony of her statement after what she'd said to me at Easter. "We're saying there's a family dynamic that isn't working, one that hurts people, one we can change if we're all willing to try." She didn't respond, but she didn't argue either, which felt like the closest thing to progress we'd had in years. As we finally began to eat our now cold food, a tentative, fragile truce settled over the table. It wasn't resolution, not by a long shot. But it was a beginning, a crack in the foundation of our dysfunctional patterns that might, with care and patience, allow something healthier to grow. The weeks following our confrontation at Perkins were both challenging and transformative. I had expected immediate resistance from my mother, perhaps even a complete severing of our relationship. Instead, what unfolded was a slow, sometimes painfully awkward, but ultimately hopeful process of change. Dad called me the day after our meeting. "I've been thinking about what you said," he began hesitantly, "about how I never stood up for you when your mother was being critical." "Yes," I prompted when he fell silent. "You're right," he admitted, his voice heavy with regret. "I failed you as a father. I told myself I was keeping the peace, but really, I was just avoiding conflict at your expense." His words stunned me. In all my years, I had never heard my father acknowledge a mistake so directly. "I'm not sure what to say," I confessed. "You don't need to say anything," he replied. "I'm the one who needs to make amends. I've started seeing a therapist, Allison, on my own, separate from whatever your mother decides to do. I want to understand why I've been so passive and how I can change." That conversation marked the beginning of a new relationship with my father. We started having coffee together once a week, just the two of us. At first, our talks were superficial, centered around safe topics like sports or current events. But gradually, we began to discuss deeper matters: his regrets, my hurts, our shared hope for healing. My mother's journey was more complicated. True to form, her initial reaction was to retreat into wounded pride and martyrdom. She sent group texts to the family about walking on eggshells and not being allowed to express opinions anymore. Daniel reported that she had spent several days dramatically sighing around the house and making passive-aggressive comments. But something unexpected happened about 2 weeks after our confrontation. Mom called me directly, her voice uncharacteristically subdued. "Pastor Mike suggested a family therapist," she said without preamble. "Someone who specializes in family dynamics. Your father thinks we should all go. At least once." "All of us," I clarified. "You, Dad?" "Me, Stephanie, and Daniel." "Yes," she replied stiffly. "If you're willing." It was as close to an olive branch as my mother had ever extended. "I'll be there," I promised. Our first family therapy session was scheduled for the following Saturday. Dr. Lynette Rahman was a calm, compassionate woman who somehow managed to create a space where even my mother felt safe enough to be vulnerable. "I'd like to start by having each of you share what you hope to gain from these sessions." Dr. Rahman began after introductions. Dad went first. I want to learn to be more present and supportive. I've been a bystander in my own family for too long. Daniel spoke next. I want us to communicate without someone always ending up hurt or angry. I want us to actually enjoy being together. Stephanie surprised me with her answer. I want to understand the roles we've all been playing and how to break out of them. I don't want to be Mom's defender or Allison's opponent anymore. When my turn came, I took a deep breath. I want to be seen for who I really am, not who anyone thinks I should be. I want to love my family without it costing me my self-worth. Mom was last, and for a moment I thought she might refuse to participate. She sat with her hands tightly clasped, looking anywhere but at Dr. Rahman. I want, she finally said, her voice barely audible, to understand why my attempts to help my children always seem to hurt them instead. It was the first time I had ever heard my mother acknowledge even indirectly that her actions might have caused pain. Dr. Rahman skillfully guided us through that first session, helping us identify patterns without assigning blame. She introduced concepts like family systems and intergenerational trauma, explaining how behaviors and expectations get passed down through families without anyone realizing it. Janet, she said gently to my mother at one point, have you ever considered that your critical approach to Allison might reflect how your own mother treated you? Mom stiffened, then slowly nodded. My mother was demanding. Nothing was ever good enough, but I always thought she made me stronger, more resilient. And yet, Dr. Rahman observed, it sounds like those experiences were painful for you. Well, yes, Mom admitted. But that's life, isn't it? Parents push their children to be better. There's a difference between encouraging growth and making someone feel fundamentally flawed, Dr. Rahman explained. One builds confidence, the other erodes it. I watched my mother's face as she processed this distinction, saw something shift in her expression, as if a new understanding was taking root. Over the next several weeks, we continued both individual and family therapy. It wasn't easy. There were sessions where old tensions flared, where Mom reverted to defensiveness or Dad retreated into silence. There were days when I questioned whether real change was possible, but there were also breakthrough moments. Like when Stephanie pulled me aside after a particularly intense session and said, I never realized how differently Mom treated us. I'm sorry I didn't see it sooner. Or when Mom, after listening to me describe a childhood incident that had deeply hurt me, responded not with denial but with a tearful, I never meant to make you feel that way. Meanwhile, I continued my own healing journey. My support group became a lifeline, a place where I could process the complex emotions that arose as my family relationships evolved. Jessica remained my steadfast friend, celebrating my small victories and offering comfort during setbacks. I also focused on rebuilding my finances. Without the drain of my parents' utility bills, I was able to start a proper emergency fund and even set aside money for a vacation, something I had never allowed myself before. My graphic design business began to thrive as I channeled more energy into marketing and client relationships. The most profound change, however, was internal. As I established healthier boundaries with my family, I found myself standing taller in other areas of my life too. I raised my rates with clients who had been underpaying me. I ended a casual dating relationship with someone who was perpetually unavailable. I started speaking up more in my professional network, sharing my expertise without the constant fear of being judged inadequate. After 3 months of weekly family therapy, Dr. Rahman suggested we try a practical exercise planning a family dinner without falling into our old patterns. No criticism, no passive-aggressive comments, no silent treatment, she instructed. Just a meal where everyone feels respected and heard. We decided to hold the dinner at my apartment, neutral territory, that didn't carry the emotional baggage of my parents' house. I spent the day cooking, not with the desperate need to impress that had driven my Easter preparations, but with the simple pleasure of creating something to share. When my family arrived, I was struck by the subtle shifts in everyone's behavior. Dad greeted me with a warm hug instead of an awkward nod. Stephanie brought a bottle of my favorite wine, a thoughtful touch that would have been unthinkable months earlier. Daniel seemed more relaxed, less like the family peacekeeper constantly on alert. And Mom, though still somewhat reserved, handed me a small gift bag without comment. Inside was a delicate silver bracelet. Attached was a note that read simply, "For my daughter who has always been enough. Love, Mom." I looked up to find her watching me nervously, an uncharacteristic vulnerability in her eyes. "Thank you," I said softly, slipping the bracelet onto my wrist. "It's beautiful." She nodded a small smile, lifting the corners of her mouth. "I thought it suited you." It wasn't a grand declaration or a dramatic reconciliation scene from a movie. It was a quiet moment of recognition, a small but significant step toward a new kind of relationship. That dinner wasn't perfect. There were still awkward pauses and moments when old habits threatened to resurface. But when Mom started to make a critical comment about how I had arranged the furniture she caught, herself took a breath and instead asked, "What made you decide on this layout?" "It's different." And when Dad remained quiet during a discussion about politics, Daniel gently prompted, "What do you think, Dad, bringing him into the conversation rather than allowing him to fade into the background?" We were all trying, stumbling sometimes, succeeding others, but making an effort that felt both strange and hopeful. As I walked my family to the door at the end of the evening, Mom lingered behind the others. "Allison," she said hesitantly, "I've been thinking about Easter." I tensed, unsure where this was going. "What I said to you," she continued, her voice unsteady, "about you being the reason our family falls apart. It wasn't true. It was never true. I was angry and lashing out, but that's no excuse. I'm sorry." The words I had never expected to hear from my mother hung in the air between us. For a moment I couldn't respond, overwhelmed by the significance of this apology. "Thank you for saying that," I finally managed. "It means a lot." She nodded, then reached out to squeeze my hand briefly before following the others out the door. I stood in the doorway long after they had gone, watching the night sky, feeling something inside me settle into place. Not an ending, but a beginning. Not perfection, but possibility. 1 year later, I found myself once again preparing for Easter lunch with my family. But this time, everything was different. For one thing, we had decided to host the meal at a local restaurant with a private dining room, a neutral space where no one person bore the burden of preparation or the home court advantage. For another, we had planned the gathering collaboratively, with everyone contributing ideas about the menu and activities. But the most significant change wasn't in the location or the planning. It was in us, in the way we had each grown and shifted over the past year of hard work, therapy, and conscious effort to break old patterns. As I drove to the restaurant, I reflected on the journey we had taken since that disastrous Easter, when Mom had pointed her finger at me and declared me the family problem. It hadn't been a straight path to healing. There had been setbacks and arguments, moments when it seemed easier to fall back into familiar roles than to forge new ways of relating. But we had persisted, sometimes stubbornly, sometimes gracefully, always moving forward, even when progress felt painfully slow. The private dining room was bathed in spring sunshine when I arrived. Dad was already there, helping the staff arrange the tables. He smiled warmly when he saw me coming over to give me a hug. "Happy Easter, Allison," he said, and I could hear the genuine affection in his voice, no longer muted by fear of my mother's disapproval. "Happy Easter, Dad," I replied, hugging him back. "Need any help?" "I think we're all set. Your mother and Stephanie should be here any minute. Daniel texted that he's running a little late." We chatted easily as we waited for the others, Dad telling me about a woodworking class he had started taking, his eyes bright with enthusiasm. It still amazed me how much he had changed, how he had found his voice and his passions after decades of quiet compliance. Mom and Stephanie arrived together, having met for coffee beforehand, a new tradition they had started a few months ago. They were mid-conversation as they entered something about a book they were both reading, and their easy rapport no longer carried the undertone of alliance against the rest of the family. "Allison," Stephanie greeted me with a genuine smile. "I love your dress. Is it new?" A year ago, I would have scrutinized this comment for hidden criticism or mockery. Now I could accept it as the simple compliment it was. Thanks. I found it at that vintage shop downtown you recommended, I replied. Mom approached more cautiously. Our relationship had seen the most dramatic transformation over the past year, but it was still tender in places, still healing. Happy Easter, Allison, she said, offering a small, carefully wrapped package. Just a little something I thought you might like. Inside was a set of high-quality watercolor brushes, a thoughtful nod to the painting I had taken up again in recent months as part of my continuing self-care practice. These are perfect, I told her sincerely. Thank you. She nodded, looking pleased. I remembered you mentioned your old ones were wearing out. This was new, this attentiveness to my interests and needs, without judgment or criticism. It was still sometimes awkward, both of us learning a new language of love and respect, but the effort itself meant everything. Daniel arrived last, bringing his new girlfriend Maya, whom he had been hesitant to introduce to the family until recently. I had met her a few times for coffee and liked her immediately. Her warmth and quick wit a perfect match for my brother's easygoing nature. Sorry we're late, Daniel apologized as they joined us. Traffic was crazy. No problem at all, Mom assured him, a response that would have been unthinkable a year ago when tardiness was treated as a personal affront. As we settled around the table for our meal, I couldn't help but compare this gathering to last Easter. There was still some tension, still moments of careful navigation around sensitive topics, but the overwhelming feeling was one of tentative peace. We were learning to be a family that supported rather than wounded each other, that celebrated our differences, instead of trying to force conformity. My relationship with each family member had evolved in its own way. With Dad, I had found a gentle friendship built on shared interests and mutual respect. He had become more expressive, more willing to show affection and engage in meaningful conversations. In return, I had learned to forgive his past failures and appreciate his efforts to change. Stephanie and I had discovered common ground we never knew existed. Without Mom's subtle encouragement of competition between us, we had developed a relationship based on mutual support and genuine interest in each other's lives. She had even referred a few potential clients to my design business from her corporate connections. Daniel remained my closest ally in the family, but now our bond was one of choice rather than necessity. We no longer needed to band together against the rest of the family, which freed us to enjoy each other's company without the undertone of shared trauma. And Mom had perhaps traveled the furthest. Through intensive therapy, both individual and with our family group, she had begun to recognize and address the patterns she had inherited from her own mother. She was learning to express love without control, to offer guidance without criticism. It wasn't always successful, but the simple fact that she was trying represented a seismic shift. As for me, my own healing journey continued both within and beyond my family relationships. I had maintained my connection with my support group, finding value in both receiving and offering help to others, dealing with family challenges. I had built my design business into something stable and fulfilling, no longer plagued by the imposter syndrome that had once made me doubt my every decision. And I had started dating someone who recognized and respected my boundaries, who appreciated me for exactly who I was, rather than who he thought I should be. The most profound change, though, was internal. I no longer measured my worth by my family's approval. I had learned to validate myself, to trust my own perceptions and feelings, to stand firm in my truth even when faced with opposition. That inner strength had transformed every aspect of my life, from my work to my friendships to my sense of purpose in the world. As we shared our Easter meal conversation flowing more easily than it ever had before, I caught Mom watching me with an expression I couldn't quite read. "Is everything okay?" I asked her quietly while the others were engaged in a lively debate about a recent movie. She nodded, a hint of moisture in her eyes. "I was just thinking about how far we've come, how far you've come." "We've all changed," I acknowledged. "Yes, but you were the catalyst," she said. "Your courage in walking away that day and refusing to accept treatment that hurt you, in showing us a different way to be a family. I don't think I've ever properly thanked you for that. I was momentarily speechless, never having expected such recognition from my mother. I just wanted us to be happy, I finally said. All of us, including me. I know, she replied. I think we're getting there, don't you? Looking around at my family, I had to agree. We weren't perfect. We still had work to do, wounds, still healing habits, still being broken and reformed. But we were moving in the right direction, learning together how to love each other without conditions, without cost. The journey from last Easter to this one had taught me perhaps the most valuable lesson of my life, that sometimes you have to be willing to walk away in order to find your way back, not to the old patterns that hurt you, but to a new way of being that honors who you truly are. That setting boundaries isn't about pushing people away, but about creating the conditions under which authentic love can flourish. That healing is possible even from the deepest wounds if you're brave enough to face the truth and do the work that truth demands. As we finished our meal and prepared to go our separate ways, I felt a deep sense of peace settle over me. Not the temporary relief of avoiding conflict, but the lasting tranquility of knowing I was finally home, not in a physical place but in my own heart, my own truth, my own worth that no one could ever again take from me. I have a question for you. Have you ever had to set a difficult boundary with someone you love? How did it change your relationship? Let me know in the comments below. And if this story resonated with you, please like, subscribe, and share it with someone who might need to hear it. Remember, you are enough exactly as you are, and you deserve relationships that reflect that truth back to you. Thank you for listening to my story, and may you find the courage to write your own on your terms.